Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 127.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
With me today is Kimberly Graves of HPE, Aruba Education Services. Big, long name. How you doing, Kimberly?
I'm doing great, Keith.
So first up, Aruba Educational Services is a part of HP Enterprise.
Yes, we are. So Aruba Education Services is the kind of the training and certification wing of originally of Aruba Networks. And then we were acquired by HPE. So now, again, we fall under the larger, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise umbrella. And we're responsible for all Aruba partner training and certification.
That's a bunch on all platforms?
Yeah, so it obviously was always traditionally our wireless platform, so our Aruba operating system that runs on our controllers, and then we also run on our virtual controllers, which are really just the Aruba Instant APs. And now in about the last year or so, all Aruba switching will also fall under the training and certification group.
And so what do you do inside educational services? What's your role?
So I'm within a group that is responsible for developing all of the training courses. So, traditionally it's been when Aruba makes acquisitions, we acquired a whole bunch of new products in the last 5 years, products like Airwave, ClearPass, all the new switching product line. So, as these new acquisitions come in, we have new products or we expand our products, we have to create brand new training courses. So the main objective there is to teach all of our Aruba partners how all of these products work, how they interoperate, and then obviously, customers and any other wireless LAN professionals, are able to take those courses. And then we have certification classes that then certify our partners in each of those products.
So if you were a newbie, just, say you're an ex-Cisco guy and you want to learn Aruba, what would be a nice recommended path through your certification programs?
So kind of our core certification exam is what we call the ACMP, Aruba Certified Mobility Professional. And there is a kind of an introductory, we'll call it introductory level course called the IAW. So Implementing Aruba Wireless Networks. And that is now currently version 8. So it's the Aruba operating system version 8. So my recommendation would be to take that IAW training course, and then consequently take the ACMP certification exam after that.
So the exam name and the course name aren't always tied together.
This is true, yes. So we have different course names and different exam names. And the primary reason for that is that we may change the course names, as we change operating systems or, as we change kind of the focus, especially right now. Our courses had always been geared just for wireless, but we have a whole new track of unified networking courses coming out. So those will be both wireless and wired networking together. So we'll be combining both of those skills into one. It's going to be called Design Professional Certification.
ACDP?
That's correct.
Oh, you've heard it here first. No, I'm sure this isn't the first announcement. It's the first time I knew about it, though.
It is a fairly new announcement, but it's a big deal for us because it is, as I was saying, that, the first time we're bringing together both the wireless and the wired side. It's kind of always been an expectation that someone who's coming into wireless is already familiar with wired networking, but that isn't always the case. So there's certainly skills they need to know as they come into wireless to be familiar with an existing wired infrastructure, but we're going to be teaching kind of all of that from the ground up and how to design from the ground up.
So what's after ACMP, the IAW class? What's the next general course?
So then we have expert level courses after that. So it kind of you kind of start to get into different tracks. So we have a focus in ClearPass. So we have something called the ACCX certification. That's the Aruba Certified ClearPass Expert. We also have a track that deals with what we call mobility, which is now going to be both wireless and wired together, which is the ACMX, Aruba Certified Mobility Expert. And then this design track that I'm actually currently working on will have the Aruba Certified Design Expert, so ACDX. All of these kind of professional level certs lead into expert level certifications. And there's a multitude of classes that lead into each of those. As I said, for ClearPass, there's a track. For the mobility, there's a track. And then for the design, there will be a separate track of classes.
Okay. So the base is the ACMP and the IAW, and then you would choose where you want to focus. Do most of your resellers have individuals focused on one or the other, or is it kind of, are you a mobility expert or a ClearPass, or is that kind of a lot of crossover between those?
So it's interesting you asked that question, because what we're finding is that with the acquisition of Aruba, obviously before the HP acquisition, all of our partners were very wireless focused. That was kind of their core mission, was to deploy wireless networks and support those wireless networks. And then with the HPE acquisition, we have a lot of partners that are on the wired side. So they've been out deploying wired switches in the data center, in a corporate data center, and then also to support the network infrastructure. So we have a big challenge here in our certification and our training program to try to make sure that we're bringing up. So if someone's already a wired expert, we want to bring them up on the wireless side and vice versa. So that's why we're creating this design track that will be unified with both of those. The idea is to bring partners from either side and bring them up to speed on the other products. Because, ideally, we want someone who's selling Aruba solutions to be selling the entire Aruba wired and wireless solution.
And obviously be trained in all things. So how do you do that personally? I know a little bit of your history, which is, you had a lot of experience from the very early on, since you're CWNE number 2 or number 1 if you don't count Devin. How did you get the skill set that allows you to develop courses on all of these different various technologies?
Well, I get that question a lot. How do you get ahead? How do you advance your career? No matter where someone is in their current, job or what their current focus is. And I always say it is to constantly learn new things, right? So I think that's what's helped me the most. So early on, I was a Novell NetWare expert. That's kind of what I did when I first came out of college. I worked for a company and I did Novell NetWare. So this is early client server technology. And then that just kind of naturally moved into the Microsoft world. When Microsoft moved into networking and kind of took that over, I was working at a company doing, consulting on Novell NetWare. And they said, hey, do you want to learn this Microsoft stuff? So of course I said, sure. So they sent me to all the certification classes for my Microsoft MCSE. And, I took all of those courses, passed all the certification exams. And then, that moved into a Cisco environment. And then I was being asked to support Cisco networks. So I went and got my CCNP and took all those classes. And the same thing happened with wireless. I was actually working as a consultant and someone asked me one day, hey, do you want to learn something about wireless? And I said, sure, sounds interesting. I'll go ahead and come to a training class. And at that point, it was a 1-day training class, which, if you think about it now, there's so much more to wireless. But at that point, it was basic connectivity. It was just, basic 802.11. It wasn't even 802.11b. It was still the 802.11 prime. And there wasn't a whole lot to configure, real rudimentary security. And so that's where I learned wireless. And then that just led into a position I worked for Symbol Technologies, which is predecessor to Motorola. They were acquired by Motorola. And there I really got kind of my feet wet in terms of wireless networking with, at the time, they called them wireless LAN switches. They then were, turned into wireless LAN controllers. And the whole idea of kind of a centralized management plane and a centralized management infrastructure. And so I think, for anyone who's, no matter where they are in their career, for anyone who's kind of looking to advance, the best thing you can do is education. The best thing you do is learn about anything new, and you never know how that's going to, turn out and help you. And I know, Cate, I know you're a big proponent of certification, and so am I. There are certainly people out there who can just study and pass the exam and maybe don't really know their hands-on stuff. But I also think that there's a certification is really important because it goes a long way to validating that you actually do have the knowledge. And a good certification program will ensure that someone does have the appropriate level of knowledge. I spend a lot of time now in my job, especially now that HP Enterprise is involved. They have an entire group that handles the evaluation of exams to ensure they're at the appropriate level, that they're written in an English language that is internationally supported. So for all international audiences, is not using any slang that we might just use as Americans. So it's important that those certification exams reach, I think, a large number of people. So that's my best advice, is to keep learning, take certification exams, take every opportunity to learn something new.
So how much training do you take on an annual basis?
I actually do quite a lot. So every time we've had new products, either through acquisition or through just internal development, I have to actually go to those classes and learn about it. So let's see, last year, the big push was Meridian. So Aruba had acquired a company that does location services. So that was called Meridian. It's now called Aruba Location Services. And I had like a few days notice. My boss called me and said, "Hey, I need you to fly to California. I need you to take this class." And I was really busy with other things and I kind of didn't want to, but he said, "Look, we really need you." And so I went. It was it was just a couple weeks post acquisition, and it was an early training just for our internal folks. So I went to that week-long class and learned everything I could about the Aruba Location Services. And then I started developing the training course for that. And of course, I have all the resources of the real experts, who really know the product inside and out. And so they work with us as subject matter experts to ensure that we have all the appropriate, technical information. So I just did that last year. I did a week-long training. Within the last 60 days, I had to go to 2 Aruba switching training classes. So again, same thing. Now that we have the Aruba switching portfolio, which is falling under our training and certification group, I had to go to 2 different switching classes. And it took me back about 15 years to before I started, doing just wireless, going back to, okay, BGP and OSPF and, all the different routing protocols and just kind of remembering all the stuff I had learned years ago when I was doing maybe Cisco switching and routing.
So is that kind of an average, 2 to 3 weeks a year for the last 15 years?
Oh, those are the actual training classes I have to sit in, right, to learn new things. But I think that on a daily basis, I am looking up information. As I'm developing our training courses, we internally to Aruba have, obviously a vast kind of a database of technical solutions and white papers and documentation. And this summer, I was working on some RF. I had to do some RF documentation on designing for this new design professional course. And, I'm familiar with it off the top of my head, but I said, you know what, let me go back and look at the Aruba technical docs. I have these things called VRDs. And there's probably 30 of them, and they're different technical solutions. The VRD stands for Validated Reference Design Guide. And
just to interject, I think they're wonderful.
Oh,
That's some of the best documentation I've seen anywhere.
Yeah. And what's important is it's not just like, it's not a help document that says, what does this button do when you click it in the interface? It's an actual design and it's a deployment. It's a real world deployment. And they go through all the challenges and the explanation, and they're very vertical market focused. So there's like an outdoor stadium one, there's one for healthcare, there's one for schools, so different vertical markets. And so there's like a high density, there's a voice deployment. But anyway, this summer I was trying to look something up and I got myself dug into one of the very high density VRDs. And about a week later, I came out of that after reading, I think it was about 300 pages of stuff.
Was that 5-part one that Chuck put together?
That is, yes. And it is awesome. And, I didn't even know that he had released it. He had just released it, I guess, the beginning of this year, January of 2017. And I, because I'm so busy with other things, I hadn't realized it was out publicly available. And I came across it and I dug into that for about a week of, it's just really good RF stuff. And it's all out there for free. You can find it all on the Aruba community, the Airheads community site. That's where all the VRDs are located now.
I totally second. VRDs are fantastic. And that one in particular, well, it's like 5 parts, and you kind of need to read all 5 parts, and you will disappear for a couple of days if you start into that.
Right. So as terms of how much I feel like I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly learning new things. And really, my whole job at Aruba is to learn new things, or find the answers that we have already documented somewhere, and then put those into easy to understand training materials that then all of our instructors can go present. And then I also have to, as part of that VRD analysis, I went back to my boss and I said, hey, we got some really good VRDs out there that I just stumbled across because I hadn't looked at them in a year or two. And he said, that's fantastic. Could you please take Chuck's 5-part 300-page VRD document on RF design and boil it down to about 20 or 30 slides, and then present that internally for all of our instructors. So that's something that I've been doing, and I've recorded those sessions, and they are going to be available soon on the community site on Airheads.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. That was a job to distill that down into the salient points.
It was. It took me a while, but it's really important because not everybody has the time to sit down and read several hundred pages of RF stuff, and understand all of it.
Well, yeah, definitely let us know or post it on Twitter or whatever when those are available on Airheads. Love to watch them. So what's in the future for Kimberly and HPE? Where are you going? You just presented last week actually at the Wi-Fi Trek on 8.0. How much of a transition is that for all the educational pieces that you put together?
Well, it's huge. So the Aruba OS 8 is our latest operating system that is, kind of a whole new architecture. So what we've basically done is taken the prior Aruba OS version, which was 6.5, and we've integrated that with a lot of the same concepts we see in Airwave. So within Airwave, you create really large hierarchies of configuration. So instead of kind of just being a flat configuration for one controller, you have the hierarchy for your entire network, and the configuration can flow from a higher hierarchy down to a lower one. So you can essentially don't have to repeat a lot of the configuration in your controllers. And so that's the new interface that we see and the new architecture of AOS 8. And then built into that is this whole concept of clustering, which is what I presented on at the CWNP Wi-Fi Trek. And the idea of clustering is to really simplify all of the things that were kind of pieces and parts. So the redundancy, the load balancing, the fault tolerance, all of that were previously implemented through different mechanisms, and now it's all included in clustering. So we get all of the client roaming between different APs to different controllers. If you had a failure of either an AP or a controller, you would have seamless, your network would stay up and running all the time, and the clients would have a seamless experience. So that whole piece of clustering, that's what's kind of the new big thing in Aruba. And then I personally am deep into this new design track. So I'm leading a team of 4 people to develop the design professional. We are about halfway through that course. That should be released beginning of the year. And then we'll have a certification exam, and then we'll be doing the design. We'll be revising the design expert. So that's about my next 6 months. We'll be working on those 2 courses and exams.
Well, being an instructor, I have just a kind of a classroom management question for you, but it also ties into from the student standpoint. This new 8.0 with its clustering and its big enterprise, how do you model that? You must have a huge rack of lab gear to develop the course, but what's the student sitting in a class get equipment-wise to pull this off? That's a lot of gear.
Absolutely. So, I've worked for Aruba for 8 years now. And when I first started working, with Aruba and teaching the certification classes, we shipped everything. We shipped equipment. We shipped, a whole bunch of Pelican cases of controllers. We shipped the APs. We shipped all of that stuff all around the world and taught the classes. We have stopped doing all of that, obviously. Better ways to kind of handle the classroom experience. So we have 2 labs right now. Aruba built a huge new facility in Santa Clara. And as part of that, we built a new remote lab environment. And then we have a secondary one that's located in Michigan. And we're probably going to end up having to build some more labs throughout the world because we have a lot of latency issues when we get to places like anywhere in Europe and especially Asia, coming back to our home labs. So the answer to that is we can support somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 concurrent classes every week with all of that equipment that we have there.
So each student then would get what, 3 or 4 controllers to work off of?
Right. So when we do our kind of our more advanced class, we have every student they have to have 2 controllers at a minimum, and there's times where they have to pair up with somebody else to actually have more than that. So they have what they call mobility master and then the mobility controller. And the other new thing about Aruba is these can now be virtualized. So currently in our lab, they actually are all hardware appliance controllers, but we're in the process of, we have a huge VMware infrastructure and to provide the clients, the wireless LAN clients for testing in the lab. But now we're starting to move some of the controller functionality also to those virtual machines. So, I think one day it all just might be one huge VM, big VM cluster. But right now there are still hardware controllers. And of course we have to have the hardware APs because you have to have the RF, you have to have the radios there.
So as a student, you have access to end user client devices talking to physical APs connected to either virtual or physical controllers.
Correct.
And you're talking to all of them remotely.
Correct. Yep. It's all. So currently we do it through a SSL VPN, but we actually are testing out a new clientless VPN type solution. And it's really fast and gives much better experience. So we're working on all of that right now. And we've got a whole team now working on a remote lab environment, and it's 24/7 because we're running classes all over the world all the time. People have to support that. And of course, the challenge we run into is with the VMware clients, they're Windows machines. I think they're all running Windows 10 now. They have to have a physical Wi-Fi radio. They have to have a physical adapter because you can't virtualize the radio. Yeah. So what that results in is these huge banks of USB hubs that then have USB physical NICs plugged in for the RF side. And they take a little managing.
As I say, somebody's got to babysit this and reset and make sure everything's.
Absolutely. Right now we have 2 full-time lab admins that they just work on and off the hours to help physically reset things if need be.
I'm glad I don't have that job. I'm glad there's people who do that though. They make the rest of our life better. Yeah. I would think coming to one of your classes, you need a really big screen to keep all those windows open.
Yeah, it's nice. There's a nice interface, and it's got one network diagram, and essentially the students can click on each of the network components. And just to mention, we also do this for the wired switching class. So the classes I just mentioned that I took recently in the last 2 months or so, they were all remote lab equipment. So even if we have a live instructor, we still use the remote lab. And this interface is such that I can see the network diagram and I can just click on, say a switch I want to connect to. If I want to connect to my core switch or my access switch, I just click on it and I open up a console session to it. Then I have immediate console access. We can do the same thing with the web interface for the controllers. It's just a real easy to use,
Is that a custom piece of software?
Yeah. So we've had some developers who've worked on that. Yes. They've had to customize that to make it work with our whole network.
Well, I think from what I hear, it's time for me to come take another class because that sounds like an enjoyable class to take. Lots of learning to go on with.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know, we talk about this internally as educators. The best experience is, of course, with a live instructor and live equipment right in front of you. Everybody wants to touch and feel it. But the cost of shipping, the cost of people having to travel, it becomes an issue where you may have people who don't take training because of all those costs involved. So if we can provide, an experience that's maybe 90% of that through the remote lab, we have virtualized classes. So we have instructors who teach in a virtual environment and basically present the slides and lecture in a, virtual, similar to like a Skype call. We actually use the GoToTraining application to do that. And then the students can access the lab equipment what I like about that is students can be anywhere in the world. They don't, they could do it at kind of off hours from their job so they can keep doing their other work. And they don't have the cost of all the travel and everything. So if we can reach more, if we can reach more people like that and teach them about our product, then I'm all for that platform.
Have you taught in that virtualized environment before?
Yes, I do it all the time. Yes.
How do you compare that to your experience when you're the live instructor?
Oh, I much prefer a live instruction because you can see the students, you can interact with them, you have a little more camaraderie. It's a challenge to teach in a virtual environment. Sometimes it feels like, because generally what we do is the interface allows us to mute all of the participants so that the instructor is the only one that they won't have a background noise, right? So the instructor is the only one that they hear. But as a result, as an instructor, you sometimes feel like you're just in a room talking to yourself.
And you are.
You're lecturing and you don't even know if anybody's out there. But we've added, so it's been a challenge for our developers and that's primarily what I do, is we've had to add more interactivity into the course. So what we'll do is we will have maybe
more structured interactivity.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. So we'll have 10, max 10 slides explaining a concept, and the instructor will lecture those, and then it'll have a little activity of, okay, well, let's, if it's about configuring something, let's go configure it. And then that's where the instructor usually takes everybody off of mute if possible, and they have a little discussion. They can demo the interface, what they're trying to show. Or like in the case of my design course I'm working on right now, it would be a little mini design. So, okay, we've talked about RF channels. Now let's do a little mini design here and let's, get some feedback from the students. So we try to have those breaks every, 15, 20 minutes or so that it feels a little bit more interactive.
Yeah, having taught both ways, I agree with you. It's so much easier as an instructor's side to see the eyes, and you can see if there's deer in the headlights, and you can change what you're saying right then rather than waiting for that 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
But it's so much cheaper. There's a huge cost advantage to going to virtual, and to get different places in the world, you kind of have to. So great. Well, Kimberly, thanks for your time. It was a good little discussion to catch up and share with the world where Aruba Education is, and where would they go to track you down, and where it's the website for Aruba Education.
So you can reach me on Twitter at Kimberly A. Graves. Also, I have an email address, of course, kimberly.graves@hpe.com. If there's something a little bit more, selective you need to send to me. Don't want to put out into the whole Twitter world. And then the training and certification page, it's the easiest way to track that down is probably to just go to arubanetworks.com. And you'll see a section under resources, and it has training and certification information there. There is a main page that will ultimately link you, if you're looking for a specific course outline, it will ultimately link you to the HPE training site, because it's all in one learning management system now. But the main Aruba Networks website's the easiest place to navigate.
Well, I appreciate your time, especially since I know you have some new things you want to go play with, and appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you at the WOPC in February.
Yeah, I will be there. Thanks, Keith.
All right. Thank you.
Wireless LAN blog reviews with Glenn Cate.
Glenn, welcome back to the show. What's our Wi-Fi blog this week?
Hey, thank you, Matthew. Today we really aren't going to look at a blog site, but it's a Wi-Fi web newspaper.
Okay.
I want to introduce our listening audience today to Carrier Waves by Omar Vasquez. Carrier Waves is a curated selection of news articles and blogs about the wireless networking industry, technology, and trends. First of all, let me tell you how to get to Omar's site. You can do a Google search on Carrier Waves and Omar Vasquez. His last name is spelled Vazquez. And then you can go to the subscribe box in the upper right, and you can enter your email address. Then you'll get Omar's monthly Carrier Waves newspaper. Or you can just go to paper.li/newsstand and search for Carrier Waves. Either way, you can find his website pretty easily. By the way, Omar's Twitter handle is at OMRVAZRIV, or you can just search for Omar Vasquez on Twitter, and you can find him as well. I am going to ask our listening audience to kind of keep Omar and his family in your thoughts and prayers. As we're looking right now, Omar lives on the island of Puerto Rico, and he is just, as well as all the residents of Puerto Rico, suffered the onslaught of Hurricane Maria. He and his family are safe, but as we have seen in the news, Puerto Rico is pretty much devastated. So Omar has mentioned, as well as a lot of people in Puerto Rico, that telecommunications are down at this time. So please be patient, maybe a few weeks before Omar gets carrier waves back up and running. And I think simply surviving is what Puerto Ricans are doing right now. So appreciate your prayers and thoughts for Omar and his work there.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, Carrier Waves is sort of a curated collection of news articles about Wi-Fi. And I like the page format that he does. It looks like the front page of a newspaper. He has tabs for headlines, photos, videos, and technology. And you can also retweet and list it on Facebook from the left sidebar. And there's also an archive list for past editions under the main tab. I really like a lot of the stuff he puts in here because he puts Wi-Fi news and blogs. And I kind of think I like to follow things and follow most of the Wi-Fi events pretty much on a regular basis. But it seems like every time I open Carrier Waves, I find something new. So if I'm in the middle of a project or something and Carrier Waves hits my email inbox, I usually stop what I'm doing and open up his web newspaper and find out some new stuff that maybe I haven't seen before. Omar usually has a surprise tab in his tab list, and the edition I'm looking at right now says hashtag MFD2, and most Wi-Fi engineers know that's Mobility Field Day 2. And here he lists a couple of blogs that he's just reviewed on Cate Networks and the NetScout G2. So he's got some great stuff on his Carrier Waves web newsletter.
Very cool. Anything that stands out that we don't want to miss?
Okay. Well, I'm kind of a graphics guy, Matthew, and I just love pictures. Now, each edition, Omar includes a photos tab where he pulls down pictures from his Twitter feeds. Sometimes it's a strange Wi-Fi deploy, a cute cartoon, or just a photo of how some WLAN engineer designed a power supply for their site survey device. Never know what's going to be in this photo pull-down list, but I always love to check it out, and I think everybody else will as well. So thank you so much, Omar, for editing and getting Carrier Waves out to the Wi-Fi community. This is a great way that you give back. And I know Omar and his families would appreciate your thoughts and prayers as Puerto Rico recovers from Hurricane Maria. And please be patient. I know Omar will restart his weekly publication pretty soon. So check out some of the archives at Carrier Waves. And I know you'll enjoy all the work that Omar has done to give back to the community.
Very cool. Thanks. And Glenn, if we want to get a hold of you or follow what you're doing.
You can follow me on Twitter at grcate, and I'd love to follow you back as well as one Wi-Fi professional to another.
Very cool. Well, this is Matthew.
And this is Glenn Cate, reminding all the WLAN professionals out there to keep on blogging in the free world. Bye for now.
10 Talks.
My name is Blake Krone. Keith asked me to do a quick little 10 talk on packet capture on the Mac because a lot of us have started to use Macs. And, well, I mean, packet captures are probably one of the most important things that we need to do from a troubleshooting perspective in wireless. If you attended Peter McKenzie's CWAP course over the weekend, where did you guys live? You guys lived in packets when you're looking for everything. And packets are one of the things that George Stefanik, a good friend of mine, and we all should say this, is that the packets never lie. If we want to know what's going on and what the traffic flow is, where the failure is, there's only one source of truth, and that is the actual packet flow itself. If we need to figure out why am I having a DHCP problem, why am I having a EAT failure, why am I having XYZ failure, the key place to look is in the packets. We go and we look at RF and we look at the actual signal strength and we make sure that we have connectivity. But it's actually really easy to give connectivity. The issues that we're having with the connectivity right here, right now in the hotel is not necessarily wireless related because you're probably all connected. You're just like me. You're struggling to actually get any packets through. So we have to go and we have to try to figure out where is the actual failure point and how do we get to that point. So on a Mac or anything really, it's why are we trying to figure out what's going on? The why. Is there a issue with us just not receiving any of our packets coming in? And then also we need to look at is what are we trying to solve? before we figure out what's the depth that we need to go to come up with our analysis. So a quick little couple scenarios that we'll look at here. First one, beacons. Beacons tell us a lot about our network. The beacons are the thing that says, hey, I'm a wireless network and I have X data rates and I have X information about my connectivity. Will you support it? So how do we go through to try to figure out our beacons? First thing is we try to get connected to our attempt at a wireless network here. And we go and we figure out, okay, I'm going to go through my network list, the network map, and I'm going to say, I want to connect to this SSID. So at least I've gotten that frame to me that says there is this possible network out there, Accor hotels that we can connect to. But it doesn't really say anything about, can we connect to it? Do we share the same commonalities in terms of what data rates we want to support or what security types we want to support? So on a Mac, this is from the little drop down in the menu bar. On a Mac, if I hold down the Option key, I get a little bit more information. And that little bit more information still doesn't provide me too much. Now it's going to say at least I can see what my country code and what my RSSI, what the noise level is, and then at least the current associated transmit rate is that I'm seeing on my connectivity. But this still isn't enough information to know, is anything actually even working? It's just giving us a little bit of information. So we want to dig into this and we want to figure out some more information about it. Adrian, a fellow WLPC attendee and community member, he created this really awesome app called Wi-Fi Explorer. So Wi-Fi Explorer is like, anybody remember back to the day of NetStumbler and doing war driving? You had the simple little tool to try to figure out all these networks that are out there. We have a updated version of NetStumbler essentially, but one of the nice things is that you can go over to the advanced details section and you can pull a lot of information from the beacon. So I don't even need to do a packet capture at this point if all I'm trying to figure out is what are the capabilities of that network. If I just need to see, do we have a common set of supported data rates that we're looking for? Or do we have information about our CCX or our WMM in there? You know, if this was more of a robust network and in tune with today's standards, we would have quite a bit more information in here that we could look at. But I didn't even have to do a packet capture to do this. If all I needed to know is what's going on with the beacons, what's going on with the actual information of the BSSID operating, just a simple, quick little tool, Wi-Fi Explorer, and you can get that information. Now, if you're on Windows, you can use acrylic Wi-Fi to get some of the same information, but this is the go-to tool for me on any of my troubleshooting steps, because the first thing I need to know is, what the heck are the beacons actually saying? That's the first point. That's your starting point is, are the beacons providing me the information I need to? If I know that I'm supposed to be connecting at 802.11n rates and I'm only seeing 802.11g rates, right there I know I have a configuration problem. I don't even need to do a packet capture to get that information. But that's not really too helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot something like this. So if you're trying to troubleshoot an EAP flow and you're trying to go down from the start all the way to the bottom and you're trying to go through all the four-way handshakes, how are you going to get that information? Where are you going to see that information? You know, at what point was that failure? You could sit there and you could go through and say, okay, I've passed through my 802.11 four-way handshake and I'm good to go. Now I'm going to try to go from state 3 to state 4, and I need to get through all of this junk. So now I have to figure out, not only do I need to capture my wireless, I need to capture my wired side on the servers and everything. So how do we go through and capture these packets? Y'all can read that, right? Y'all see all those commands, everything there? Okay, TCP dump, and I started off by saying I'm going to do the help because I have no idea what command I need to do to actually be able to create this packet capture, to be able to pull the information. The great thing about macOS is that it has a underlying with a Unix derivative core, so we have all these tools at our disposal. The problem is there's no front end that wraps around it. So unless you know specifically, I need to go through here and I need to do TCP dump -I with my Ethernet or my wireless interface. So what was my interface to get the amount of block size I need, and now I need to put it out to a file somewhere. Unless I know all of that, and I didn't even bother saying like what channel specifically I want to scan on or anything. I could have if I figured out the appropriate command to be able to do that. So then when I get my data, TCP dump to view it. And again, I have to know all of my switches to figure out how I want to read that information. And I end up with a dump across my entire command line that hopefully maybe you can parse as this was your packet flow. But where in there was my .1x authentication? So how do we simplify that? This is almost a sales pitch for Adrian. Adrian wrote another tool, and this is the nice thing about the community is that we said we needed this tool. And somebody who had the ability to code stepped up and said, okay, what does this tool have to look like? What do we need to do? So we have AirTool out there. So it's another menu option that you add, and now you can drop down and you say, what do I want to do? I need to go through here and I need to figure out, I want to capture something. So what is it that I want to capture? I want to go through and I want to capture on channel 1. So I just hover over channel and I get the option to go to channel 1. Now I can capture the packets, or the frames, on channel 1. What do I want to look for? Do I want the radio tap header? That's one of the key things that we need when we do wireless captures is we need to have the radio information. You want to be able to see the .11 transactions. You want to be able to see the acknowledgements go on. So I go through here and I capture all this information. I still get a hot mess. Now you have to go into Wireshark or you have to go into OmniPeak on Windows or something to be able to figure out exactly what you're looking for, to be able to pull the information. But at least now I have all my radio header information that I was looking for, as well as to be able to see all those acknowledgements and stuff. So the last thing I want to close out on here is how do you better visualize this? And this is really cross-platform because it doesn't matter what you're on, but Mojo packets from Airtight Networks, formerly now they are known as Mojo, they have this web-based UI that allows you to upload it. So AirTool will integrate with CloudShark and Mojo packets to be able to send information up to it so you can get all your visualizations up in here, take that trace file, go through it, and look at all the information, and close out with packet analysis is hard. That's what everybody always says. Everybody always fears the CWAP exam because they're like, oh my God, I got to look at packets. Packets aren't hard. They're only hard if you don't try. I mean, I'm not to the level of Peter. I still am in awe at Peter when he moves around in OmniPeak because he just knows it because he's used it for so long. But you have to go through and you actually have to make the effort. And once you make the effort to try to figure out how to do packet captures, you're going to be able to solve any problems. So that's what I had with 18 seconds to spare. All right, that's me if you want to ask me any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.